Hello, everyone. I'm Hal Eisner. Welcome to a special edition of In Depth honoring Hispanic Heritage Month. That month, designated to recognize the achievements of Hispanic Americans, runs from September the 15th to October the 15th. We've been bringing you stories of highlights of the contributions of our citizens from countries like Mexico and Central America, South America, Spain, Cuba. Those contributions include art, food, music, and also social change. Before the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision, there was Mendez versus Westminster in 1947. Mexican-American students joined a class action lawsuit led by the Mendez family to desegregate Orange County schools that ended up starting a domino effect that would open classroom doors around the nation. Christy Fajardo spoke to the Mendez family and Sylvia Mendez in particular, who was the child at the center of it all.
I was so happy that my parents were finally being honored for what they had done. You know, that mental freedom wasn't for me, it was for them.
85-year-old Sylvia Mendez and her parents have been given so many honors, they fill a room in her Orange County home.
Separate is never equal.
There's a Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Sylvia Mendez.
Even a postage stamp. But the honor that still eludes her is her family's place in California's textbooks.
I want them to remember how people have always been fighting for education and for equality.
As a child in 1947, she made headlines with Mendez versus Westminster. Her father, Gonzalo Mendes, who was of Mexican descent, and her Puerto Rican mother, Felicitas, had moved back into town because of another injustice. They were leasing a ranch from a Japanese-American family who had been sent to an internment camp. That's when Sylvia's aunt took them and her children to enroll in this nearby school in Westminster. Sylvia Mendez still remembers overhearing an official saying her light-skinned cousins could attend, but she'd have to go to the Mexican school.
My aunt got so upset. She says, "What do you mean? I'm not going to leave my children here if you're not going to take my brother's kids. I'm going home right now and telling my brother what you just said."
Gonzalo Mendes, a successful businessman, hired an attorney and recruited more Latinos to the case. 8-year-old Sylvia was being taught domestic skills in class, not academics. Her father spent most of the money he'd amassed fighting the case. She says school officials eventually asked him to settle.
"Well, let your kids go to that white school. Just stop all that." By then my dad says, "No, I'm not fighting just for them now. I'm fighting for all the children."
Sylvia was 10 when she finally got to go to the white school.
It was nothing like what happened in the South, nothing. But I do remember this little white boy coming to me. He says, "Ugh, ugh." He went to me, "Ugh, you're a Mexican. What are you doing here? Who said you could come here?"
But she says she also remembers the classmates who were kind.
What I learned at that age, 10 years old almost, that everybody's not prejudiced.
Her family's victory in court led to the desegregation of California schools and inspired the arguments in Brown versus Board of Education. All that was lost on Sylvia as a child. When her mother asked her why they went to court, she answered,
"Yes, you were fighting for me to go to a beautiful white school with the monkey bars and the swings, because we don't have that in a Mexican school." She said, "Sylvia, that's not what we were fighting for. We were fighting because under God we're all equal."
Decades later, Mendez, now a retired nurse, wants her parents' story told. Educators are free to teach the case in class, but in 2008, then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger vetoed a bill that would have included it in state textbooks.
I was so heartbroken, I wanted to die. I think I cried for a week or something like that. I couldn't believe that he would do that.
The district that once fought to keep her out is now teaching her case in the classroom. There are also schools that bear the Mendez name, but the children who fill them are overwhelmingly Latino. De facto segregation is still a reality, Mendez says, and like her parents, there are other families still fighting.
The 14th Amendment said that we're all equal. We all deserve the same quality of education, same kind of treatment.
Christy Fajardo, thanks for that story. It reminds us of the pervasiveness of Hispanic culture in Los Angeles. In fact, a number of LA landmarks are built around Hispanic culture. One of those is Mariachi Plaza in Boyle Heights. But while Mariachi Plaza is known to many Angelenos, one of the most famous Hispanic cultural landmarks in LA is not far away. Of course, we're talking about Olvera Street. In years past, more than 2 million people had visited the birthplace of Los Angeles each year. But as Bob DeCastro shows us, the pandemic has left our city's proud center struggling.
It is where cultures come together, the new and the old, the colorful and the quiet. It has been the heart and soul of Los Angeles since the pioneering pobladores from Mexico settled near this very spot in the 18th century.
They were a mixed group of Spanish, including soldiers, of people of mixed race, European, Spanish, and the indigenous. Some indigenous, but also African, those of African descent. So there were 24 families altogether.
Since then, some of LA's most cherished pieces of history have stood the test of time. Villa Adobe, the oldest residence in the county. La Placita, a church founded in 1814. And other buildings, including this one, which is now the home to La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. Abelardo de la Peña Jr. is the communications director for the museum.
It's a place of ceremony, of festivities. It's a place of public discourse. People could still come over, get on a soapbox and give a speech. They can hold press conferences there. You see a lot of marches. They start maybe at City Hall. They end up here if it has to do with immigration or civil rights, or they end up here at La Plaza. You have your Cinco de Mayo celebrations. You have your Dia de los Muertos celebrations. It's the center of Mexican-American life here in Los Angeles.
Now El Pueblo faces one of its biggest challenges yet, recovering from the global pandemic. With no foot traffic, many restaurants and shops on Olvera Street have shut down for good. Some homeless have moved in.
I mean, deserted. They had fenced off the plaza itself, and where usually there are music going on, lots of activity, Aztec dancers, this guy that would come and play his Andean flute almost every day, it all quieted down. And very disheartening, because being the center of old Los Angeles and kind of the center of Mexican life,
it still looks relatively quiet during the week, but on the weekends, signs things are slowly returning to normal. Olvera Street recently hosted a COVID vaccination clinic. Tourists are showing up in larger numbers, and the dancers and mariachis have returned.
But also were the regulars who have been coming by, sitting on the benches, having conversations, getting into arguments, and really it is springing back to life, but it still has a bit of a ways to go.
A place founded by those with the same determined spirit. That sense of hope has never left.
As things start reopening and people are ready to experience what they've experienced before, coming back to a place like La Plaza, and people are also rediscovering it and discovering it. So I see a big future for it.
Bob DeCastro, Fox 11 News.
Thanks, Bob. Coming up next on Fox 11 News In Depth, we take a look at another Hispanic icon in Los Angeles. He's been the Spanish voice of the Dodgers for decades and is getting ready to wrap up his illustrious career. We'll have Jaime Harin's story coming up next. Be right back. The Dodgers' longtime Spanish-language broadcaster Jaime Harin has announced he's retiring at the end of the 2022 season. Harin began calling Dodger games way back in 1959. And before discussing his retirement with the rest of the media, he spoke with our Laura Diaz about calling it a career. Here's Laura.
How are you?
Good to see you. Say it's not so.
His name was Jaime Harin.
Big day.
Yeah, they're going to make the announcement this afternoon. I took the decision after consulting with my sons and with some friends. One of them, Vince Kelly. I called him a couple of weeks ago. I told him that I was thinking of retiring, not this coming year, but the following years. He said, Jaime, that's a very, very good idea. If you have reached that decision, do it.
Hall of Famer Jaime Harin has been the Latin soundtrack of the Dodgers since 1959. Back then, the native of Ecuador was the news and sports director of KWKW, and the team wanted to create a bond with the Latin community. And boy, did they. Simply put, Jaime means as much to the Spanish-speaking community as Vin Scully does to English speakers. We all remember when they walked arm in arm down the left field line the night Jaime was inducted into the team's Ring of Honor. Jaime is nearly 86. Vin retired. Even Jaime's son Jorge is retired. And his beloved wife Blanca died 2 years ago. Priorities change.
At the beginning, it was very, very difficult. But I was very fortunate, very blessed to have my family around me. So with them around me, with Maggie taking care of me, everything is moving more easy, more easy, more easy. I always will have the princess, my wife, but it's getting better.
Jaime has important plans for the foundation that he started in honor of Blanca, and next season should be a blast for everybody involved.
Think that the people will remember me in a nice way, because I have been with them so many years, you know, every single day. It has been a great ride.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for that. What Jaime Harin is to baseball, Porto's is to bakeries. It's a local culinary treasure here in Southern California. But it all started in Cuba. Gigi Graciette has their story.
From sweet to savory, from the classic cubano, the secrets in the sauce sandwich, to the pastelitos de guava and café con leche. At Porto's, everything is served with sabor latino.
We always try to stay true to our roots, because we know that people come here because what we offer is unique and different.
Porto's, it is a multi-million-dollar business, but at its heart, its culinary core, it is still Rosa's restaurant, a family-run business that started in Rosa Porto's kitchen in Cuba.
She came from a family of businesswomen. They were all had little stores in Cuba. So she grew in that environment where you can do it.
It was the 1960s when Rosa and Raul Porto immigrated from Cuba to California with 3 small children and only the clothes they were wearing. But they brought with them Rosa's grandmother's recipes, a strong work ethic, and a dream.
Her dream was really to be self-employed. And I think that's very relatable to a lot of Latinos. They define themselves with their work.
Settled in Los Angeles, Rosa continued baking and selling her specialty cakes and those famous potato balls. More on those later, out of her home. But when the line of customers got too long, she knew it was time to make her dream of owning a bakery a reality.
Really, the only challenge we faced was getting a loan. So we needed to get a $5,000 loan. And that was the big challenge because we had no collateral. But we ran into a Cuban guy that worked for Bank of America. He knew of her work, he was a customer, and Lord and behold, he took a chance.
Porto's officially opened in 1976 on Sunset Boulevard in Echo Park. The rest is history. Porto's success, the family says, built by Rosa's no excuses mentality and her si se puede mindset.
In life, there'll always be prejudice, there'll always be door. You just have to kick up harder. There was nothing that was going to stop my mother.
Rosa Porto passed away in 2019 at the age of 89, and yes, she was still cooking and creating in her senior years. Raul Porto is now 89 and retired. Rosa's 3 children run Porto's alongside 4 of her 7 grandchildren, all of them her pride and joy.
She would tell them, I'm doing this for you. So it was all for them. This was her legacy.
6 decades later, Porto's has grown from 1 employee, Rosa, to over 1,500. From 1 location to 5, with more being built, along with the thriving new online business, with Porto's Sabor Latino now being shipped across the country. But some things haven't changed. Everything is still cooked fresh daily. The breads and sweets all baked in-house, with particular attention paid to detail, like airbrushing the sugar glaze. The mariquitas, plantain chips, are fried and salted to perfection, and the sandwiches, medianoches and cubanos, the most popular, are made to order. But ultimately, it is still all about this, the potato ball, which is really called a papa rellena.
Did your mom get a kick out of people calling her papa rellenas potato balls?
She laughed her head off. She thought it was hilarious. A ball, a ball, a ball.
Call it potato, potato, a ball, or a papa. It is, together with the cheese roll, Porto's #1 seller. So much so, Porto's even trademarked the names potato ball and cheese roll.
People just can't have enough of those. We sell them by the millions.
Porto's, an immigrant family's success story, a legacy of hard work and love.
How do you want your mother to be remembered?
As a trailblazer, somebody who kicked ass and was not scared of anything.
At Porto's in Glendale, Gigi Graciette.
Thanks, Gigi, for that delicious story. Coming up next on Fox 11 News In Depth.
20 years later, he's still there.
Es quesadilla de camarón.
A new documentary explores the iconic Los Angeles lonchera or taco truck. And there's a good deal more intrigue than you might suspect. We'll be right back. You know, talking about Porto's Bakery reminds us that one of the most joyous parts of Hispanic culture is the food, of course. You know, and what could be a more iconic example of Hispanic food than the humble taco? And that, of course, brings us to mind the other icon of Hispanic culture, the taco truck or lonchera. Our next guest is actually an old colleague of ours here at Channel 11 who used to work on the assignment desk, Patricia Nazario, who left us to become a documentarian, a field I have an awful lot of respect for. And when you went into documentary work, you kind of got your feet wet, and then you got into this notion of a taco truck and then the trucks in Los Angeles. Tell us the name of this documentary. Tell us what it's about. Tell us why you went there.
It's called Backstreet to the American Dream, Hal, and the point was to draw this distinction between the pop culture trucks that were hot in 2008, 2010, and that old traditional lonchera mom and pop model. When I saw that pop culture boom, it just begged the question of, well, what about these other guys? What about their story?
And so there was something intriguing about that to you, and as you delved into that, what'd you learn?
Wow, that's a huge question. I just learned that these people were so open. They were just so willing to share their story. You know, I came at them. I'm not Mexican, but I speak Spanish. And I came to them with genuine curiosity, just an authentic wanting to know their story. And the more I asked and I hung around, the more they invited me into their trucks, into their worlds, and shared their stories. We traveled to Mexico about 5 times over 8 years, always supported by the Mexican consulate here in Los Angeles. So it was definitely, I mean, these things don't happen in a vacuum. It always takes support to bring a story like this forward. I think that's why a lot of news organizations don't do them. But it was definitely a deep dive into the world of these families, what they leave behind, the reasons they leave their home countries, what they come here for, and the struggle, everything that ensues in that trajectory.
Yeah, documentary work is very challenging. I know a few documentarians, and I know the kind of work you have to do and the kind of research you've got to do. And then you stumble on things like racism. You stumble on things like social justice, social injustice. What kind of things did you learn in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, those things were not even part of my initial planning. I thought it would be a fun story because I started with Grill 'Em All and with Ryan Harkins. They had just come off of that fanfare of winning the Great Food Truck Race. They were also very open about sharing their story. So we hung out with them, got a lot of great footage. You know, people would like honk at them in the street, stand in line for blocks to get their burgers. So that was the beginning. And then I found what I wanted to juxtapose against. So I went to Paramount High School and I lived in Paramount for my teenage years. And in that neighborhood, there was a mom and pop, that little lonchera that parked at the same corner, you know, for weeks, years on end. And so when I saw Ryan and Grill 'Em All, I was like, well, what about these guys? And so when I found a family that could fit that model, that's really what resonated. That's where the magic happened. You know, finding this woman, having her tell her story of police harassment, being pregnant, being shoved and pushed into a police car because she wouldn't move her truck when the cop came by and said to move it. And how she says this went on day after day after day after day. So I didn't know that going into the story, but that's one example of just one of the social justice issues that came forward.
Well, yeah, these can be eye-opening, situations when you go in to start looking into something, kind of getting into the weeds. And I guess, these are businesses or livelihoods on wheels. And so success is everything, because you got to pay for the gas, you got to pay for the food, you got to pay for the grills. What'd you learn about all of that?
Yeah, and beyond that, Hal, this is their very sustenance, and their worldview is different than what we grew up with, right? Because their worldview is home first. So yeah, they have to pay for the gas, the food, they have to provide all of the paper goods to serve their food, but they're thinking about how much money they can send home that week. They're thinking about their mom back home, their kids back home, that grandparent back home, or whoever back home needs medication. So that's a priority, as opposed to I'm going to go buy myself this Gucci purse or these Nike shoes, or go to this club, or live in this neighborhood. So their priorities are different, and there's just something really humbling and just very genuinely beautiful about that.
Let me just ask you real quickly. We have a half minute left. You're on the other side of the country right now. You're in Manhattan at a film festival. Very quickly, tell us about that. And I bet you're really excited.
Yeah, so this is the Workers Unite Film Festival, and they really gravitated toward this part we're discussing here. Backstreet to the American Dream is a juxtaposition between these two worlds. The Workers Unite Film Festival really loved the energy of the film. They thought it was a good story, a compelling story, but they really are focusing on this part, this woman's story, Doña Guille, who is the owner of that El Pescadito truck, and her story, her struggles to overcome economic discrimination, what she's had to go through and all the years of running that truck. She's been parking at the same spot since 1982. And they just loved her story. It really resonates with immigrants. It's an immigrant story. There's no other way to put it.
Well, good luck with your documentary. Good luck in New York. And glad to have you back at your old digs. Good to see you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Very good. And coming up next on Fox 11 News in Depth, we'll be right back. And finally, if you haven't already, please check out my podcast. It's called What the Hell, and it's available wherever you subscribe to podcasts, or just go to whatthehellpodcast.com. Well, that's it for this week's Fox 11 News in Depth. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week, everybody. And as we go, let's take a last look at the trailer for Backstreet to the American Dream. We'll see you next time.
We didn't see the whole food truck revolution coming, or all these trucks jumping on the bandwagon.
Love them, enjoy it.
No napkins needed. They're the new gourmet restaurants.